That's one of the problems with technology, is it makes us more connected than ever, but we're more disconnected from each other emotionally.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yes.
This is a great tabletop conversation to have with your family. That's a good visual. Yeah. And
You said, sure.
Sure.
That's not exactly where I was going with that, but
Yeah.
Welcome to the Mental Health Janitors, where we help you clean up the mess in your head. I'm your host, Sgt Q, and with me as always, Doc Jess.
Welcome.
And so today we've got a great episode for you guys. We're going to talk about telehealth, what it was before and what it is now, and how you can access it. We're also going to talk about current events. It's fall, and so we're going to talk about what does fall do to your mental health. Don't worry, there's some positive stuff in here. You guys are going to love it. Then we're going to talk about tools for your toolbox. We're going to talk about passive aggressive, assertive, different types of communication that you can utilize. And then we're going to get into a practical application of these I statements. So tell us, Jess, what is an I statement?
In a nutshell, it's learning how to communicate more effectively with the people in your life instead of blame shifting, helping it take from blame shifting to clearly and effectively communicate your feelings and your needs without shutting the other person down to be defensive, deflective, or denying. It's a good, healthy strategy in communicating harder things.
Awesome. I definitely need this.
Yes.
So let's get into it, Jess. We're going to talk about the new advancements, telehealth. And so it seemed very impersonal when this first came out, like in 2018, 2019. It's like telehealth, this idea, the VA wanted you to just call in and talk to a therapist. And I thought, who would want to do that? And then COVID hit and you had to do it. And so it just totally changed our idea of what telehealth could look like. And then we came out with these Zoom and all these different online portals that you can do video conferencing now. It's really changed the way we can communicate as people, and it changes our comfort level of that. So tell us a little bit about this telehealth, what it was before, what it is now, and how you use it in your practice.
Yeah. So just like Aaron said, it was actually starting to make an appearance years before COVID, but it never really gained any ground until the COVID lockdowns began and people had to switch their way of doing life. And as mental health began to grow, mental health challenges began to grow during that lockdown season, we still had to reach out to counselors and therapy for help to help us start processing it through there. I would like to add also that all the amount of social anxiety that has compounded from that lockdown telehealth has really given a certain demographic of people that are really afraid to go in and see a counselor a little bit of more safety, being in the comfort of their own home. A lot of younger generation are more comfortable on screens. And so there is a market out there for telehealth to be productive. I, as a therapist, prefer one-on-one, being across from you. I like body language. I just like, maybe I'm old school. But I also like the idea of having telehealth as a backup, because there's people all over the state of Washington that if a veteran that's like, hey, I really want to see you, but they're 4 hours away, they can still see me. I can still offer that as an option. When I go out of town for conferences, there's certain clients that still need to see me every week. I could still see them while I'm out of town. It's just opened up a lot more resources and availability for certain people. Telehealth also has gone as far to have, I have never done any real research, but texting.
Yes.
There's a
texting option, and it's usually, I don't want to say like a call center, but it kind of is like a call center where those can come in, and then it's really just a way to triage people and then get them connected to an actual counselor.
But I think about there's an organization called or company BetterHelp. You see it.
Yep.
You see it all over. And really, what they can charge a lot less for their counseling because there's no overhead, right? So if I was 100% telehealth, I could charge a lot less because I don't have to pay for supplies. I don't have to pay for office space. There's a lot that comes with having a physical office. And so it makes it a little more reasonably priced for other people that might not have insurance coverage and then you have a huge database of all these counselors for better health that you can, be a little more specific for what you're looking for, male, female, specialize in this or that. And so there's a lot of pros to telehealth. And I also see, as the devil's advocate, is it also keeps people in their bubble of not stepping out and being uncomfortable to grow. And so I wish that there was more access to maybe like learning to, and I'm sure a telehealth counselor, a good one, would help people that go to see them for social anxieties, that, they don't just let them sit in their room all day, every day, that there's little things they do. And there's things that you can push your clients to do outside of your 1 hour on the screen. But there's pros and cons to it. And especially after the COVID lockdowns, it just really blew up and took over.
You said something that I thought was interesting. You said, well, maybe I'm old school, but we have to be. Our communication is old school.
Yeah.
Oral tradition is still captivates a lot of people. Oral tradition of telling stories. That is how, for thousands upon thousands of years,
that's good. How
we would share and communicate ideas. We would share feelings, thoughts, our history. Long before there was written word, there was oral tradition where you're talking and communicating. And like you said, there's so much more to communication than just the words that we speak. So telehealth originally was just on the phone. And you're missing, I want to say 85% of communication if you're just hearing the words that somebody is saying. Communication is voice inflection, it's tone, body language is one of the largest portions. And if you go back, I actually gave the statistics on how communication is broken down. And you can see that telehealth, it's great in the short term, I think. But long term, you want to be in front of a counselor. You want to be able to have that experience with another human. That's one of the problems with technology, is it makes us more connected than ever across vast, open terrain and across countries and cities, but we're more disconnected from each other emotionally.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah, we get connected, through the digital aspect, but emotionally we're just not connected. It's a different form of communication through a screen or through a phone than it is in person. So telehealth can be great in my opinion, but you really need to seek out that personal one-on-one connection with people. You made a great point with the social anxiety. If all you're doing is staying in your little personal bubble and talking to a therapist on a phone, you're not going to be able to have the experience of getting outside of that and overcoming that debilitating experience that you have around social anxiety. You have to go out and face it and work through it. And so as I see telehealth as working well, and I did have an opportunity to bring telehealth here to my building and have it set up and do all of those things during COVID. It just didn't work out for us because we had so many other things going on. But the VA was really trying to push this telehealth where people could come into my building and access it there and do all of these different things. But it just didn't work out. So I learned a lot about the process and how it works. But again, I think that it should be used sparingly.
Yeah.
If you can't go in person, use it, but really you want to be in front of somebody, just my personal opinion on it.
Yeah. And this is a good point, because if you think about how many things turned virtual over COVID, how many people learned they could do their jobs from home, and how there's pros and cons to that as well. But one of the cons is people didn't get back into society. And so people would say, like, when are things going to get back to normal? There's no more normal. It's never going to get back there, because it separated us as human beings, and it showed us how comfortable we are isolated. And I don't know, I know we're never going to get back to what normal was. And being intentional to say, hey, this is something that could be more comfortable for me, and I'm going to step out of that and challenge myself and be uncomfortable for a little bit to get back to relational growth with people.
And I think you hit it exactly. You have to be intentional about it, because it's super easy to stay at home and click list all your groceries in, Uber Eats your takeout meals and not interact with anybody, work virtually, do your therapy through telehealth. Like, it's super easy to just be a hermit and be isolated, but that just continues to feed those mental health conditions. The negative bias kicks in, depression, anxiety, social anxiety, all these different things start to bombard you, because we are designed to be a social species.
Yeah.
Like, that's at our biological level, we're designed to be in that herd mentality, to be social, to be in community and work with one another. Scripture talks about that, about being part of the body, being part of a body of believers. Don't forsake the gathering of the brethren. I mean, when you look at, and you don't have to believe me, you can research this. It's widely known. They looked at all the different demographics and when it came to mental health, to try and figure out who did well and who did not. Every single time, people who are part of a church community, and I'm not talking people who say they're Christian and maybe watch a sermon online. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the people who are actually part of a body of believers who would go to church, who would go to worship, spend time together. Those people in that demographic did much better with their mental health during COVID than any other demographic that they researched. Yeah. You don't have to believe me. You can go look it up. And it's every single time that they outperformed every other demographic. And it's because they kept that sense of community.
Well, yeah, it also reminds me of the scripture that says to bear one another's burdens.
Yes.
For thousands and thousands and thousands of years, the Holy Spirit who inspired those writers knew we are better together and that we need each other to bear each other's burdens in order to be successful mentally, spiritually, physically, emotionally.
Right. The scripture says 2 are better than 1 because they have a good reward for their service. Woe be it to the man who falls when he is alone, because there is no one there to pick him up.
Yeah.
It's right there. We talked about this in our last episode where scripture, even if you're not a believer, it's totally fine. You can still respect it. The Bible as a great historical document. And you can see that this ancient wisdom that's collected in this book, best-selling book of all time, by the way, it is being proven by science today, because we can see how the brain operates. We can see how we operate as a social species. And we can see all of these things that the scriptures have been telling us for thousands of years. Yep. Science is proving it. Science and religion are not at odds. They are compatible. One proves the other. And so it's fascinating when you can get past your own negative bias about Christianity. And I had to do that. I didn't grow up being a Christian. I found the Lord when I was in my 30s. And so I'm fairly new into this game. And I had a huge negative bias against Christians for the majority of my life. But once I got past that, and then once I started actually researching the brain and seeing, when I first started my journey of learning about mental health, I was reading the Bible and I was reading these medical journals. So I'm like, these two things are saying the exact same thing. It was incredible. Yeah. I'm like, is anybody else seeing what I'm seeing here? I wrote a whole book on it because it was fantastic. I was like, this is incredible. I don't think I could have learned one above the other. I had to really learn them together. It radically changed my life. So think about that in your journey. How are you isolating away right now?
Yeah.
How are you avoiding situations just because it's easier, it's more convenient to hit the button for click list than to go in and have to interact with people in the grocery store? So just think about it. I want you guys to just reflect for a moment and think, how am I isolating away when I need to be connecting with others?
Yeah, that's good.
Awesome. All right, Jess, let's get into current events. Speaking of connecting, we're going to talk about the fall and how that can improve your mental health journey. So I do another segment on Mondays. It's called Mental Health Mondays. And so I just do a short video, 2 to 3 minutes. I talk about a different mental health component or procedure or research study that I found during the week. And I'll do a little video on that. You can catch it on my Facebook and on my TikTok and on my Instagram and all the other socials. You can find it. It's on YouTube. I think I plugged them all, right? It's on all my socials. And I unpacked this. The one I unpacked today, which I thought was fascinating, was fall. I just looked up, what are the trending mental health conversations that are happening? And people were talking about the fall. Yeah. And so what do you think of, Jess, when you talk about the fall? What are some ideas that come into your mind?
Well, first and foremost is my daughter's name that I named Autumn, Autumna. And I named her that for several reasons because I am so fond of fall. I love the fall. I love the colors. And I love that when she was born, we didn't know her name yet. And she was born with this auburn red hair, these little auburn red eyebrows. She's gotten darker over the years, her hair and stuff. But I was like, oh my gosh, she looks like fall. And so I was like, I want to name her Autumn. Right. So I think of wonderful things when I think of fall, but I also think of Ugg boots, or I don't wear Uggs. I wear Kirkland brand knockoffs. Just as good. I think of slippers. I think of rainy days and movies. I think of being inside after a summer of just go, go, go. I'm the kind of person I'm outside. If it's sunny outside, I'm outside. I want to be outside. I want to be outside. And there is a time to wake and there's a time to sleep. There's a time to be outside and there's a time to be inside. And so I find, though we're still pretty busy in the fall with soccer and things like that, I love the fall because I feel like it brings us back together as a family, the structure, the discipline of going back to school, having a daily routine. I think of, I love fall. There's my answer.
And you know what's funny is that is exactly what everybody else says online too. It really, you hit like every one of my talking points right there.
Okay.
Because in the summer, everybody's traveling, going places, you're out late because the sun's out. And so people are out doing a bunch of stuff. And so you don't really have a schedule set. It's just kind of this free for all. And then when fall hits, everybody goes back to school. And so immediately you get back into that routine. Which routine is really good for your mental health.
We've talked about that a lot.
Yes. Routine is great. So creating that structure and routine and discipline, it's phenomenal for your mental health. So you start to get back into that rhythm, which is great. The other thing that I thought was really unique, you didn't mention this, but a lot of other people do. A lot of people have problems with body positivity. And so in the summer, they see people out there wearing less clothes, wearing these skimpy outfits, bikinis, the beach, all these things. And maybe they're a little self-conscious about their own body. And so when the fall hits, you're wearing comfy clothes, you're wearing warmer stuff, it's bulkier, so your figure's hidden a little bit more. So the confidence and body positivity goes up because there's not that expectation or anxiety around having to get in the pool or wearing less clothes because it's hot and showing your figure.
I never thought about it that way.
Yeah. So that's
really resonating.
Right. Is it? Resonating. Yeah. Because it's just this thing that when I read it, I was like, oh my gosh, that makes complete sense. I can totally get that. But it wasn't forefront of my mind either until I read it in this article. I was like, oh, that makes complete sense.
Well, it reminds me of when I was pregnant. I loved being pregnant because when I carry extra weight, I carry it in the front and everybody always is like, hey, are you pregnant? I'm like, no. And they're like, oh, shoot. Right? Like we were at church.
I shouldn't laugh at that.
No, we were at church. Maybe this is a good short.
No, I remember this.
We were at church and there's a slower gentleman at our church. It was during COVID. So he's
slower. He is developmentally delayed. He's developmentally I can't even say that.
Delayed.
He is developmentally delayed.
Yes.
There we go. My goodness.
Sweet guy, grown guy, sweet guy, a little developmentally delayed. So during COVID, right? We're like in the heart of COVID. So we're having church outside and he screams across the parking lot, hey, Sister Jess, when's the baby due? And everybody knows I'm not pregnant, right? And so I'm like, brother so-and-so, honey, I'm not pregnant. And he's like, oh, okay. And I remember Aaron was right there and he was like, I was like, Aaron? But I'm so glad he said it to me because I can handle it. I'm pretty confident. Like, okay, I need to lose these 15 COVID pounds. Got it. I gain all my weight there, right? But when I got pregnant, talking about it, like fall covering, like I was my most confident when I was pregnant because it was so obvious I was pregnant and I just, I rocked it. Right. So fall, we're bundled up in sweaters and cardigans and
and so it really is it really does help people. So I mean, think about that. I'm pretty sure a lot of our listeners and people watching that's resonating with them too. Like, yes, that makes complete sense. So all those things are boost to your mental health. Some of the other things that are a boost are the foods that we eat, more comfort foods, right? So we're not eating fish tacos anymore, which I love fish tacos. You're eating more soups, more chowders, more stews, more chilies,
casseroles,
more casseroles, more cornbreads, more of that good home cooked comfort food that you're normal, that during the summer, you're not eating that stuff because you're go, eating snacks and whatever else, but you're eating that comfort food, which that speaks to my soul, comfort food. I just love those, the crock pot going, smelling that chili when I get home, or my wife makes this amazing salmon chowder. So I'll fish in the fall, I'll smoke salmon, and then she'll take and make salmon chowder out of that. And it's just incredibly good. So all of that builds that family unity, because you're indoors more with your family, spending time together, like you said, watching movies. All of those things really build your mental health. And so those are things that are super positive around fall. And so think about that. What are some of your fondest memories of fall? Put that in the comments. We'd love to hear from you guys. What are some of your most fond memories in fall? And if you give us a really good one, we might read it next week when we do the next episode. So if you guys give us a really cool story about your favorite memory of fall, we will read it on air for you guys.
Yeah.
So,
and when this airs, we might be closer to Thanksgiving.
Yeah, we might be.
And like all the wonderful, anyways. Yeah.
Oh, all the wonderful foods. We're talking about food. We'll do a whole episode on food.
Yes, let's do it.
Definitely do that.
Yeah. Well, and it's also, we talk about having, we've talked about the statistics around gratitude.
Right.
Like this is a great tabletop conversation to have with your family. What do you love about fall?
Yes.
I don't know, just a little.
It is. And it's funny, and I didn't recognize this till you just said that. So I do Toastmasters, which I want to become a better public speaker. So I joined Toastmasters and they help me do that. So every week I go there, we talk about different things. They do this thing called Table Topics. And they'll go around the room and you have to give a 1 or 2 minute speech on whatever the subject is. And that's what our subject was last week. What's your favorite thing about fall?
Huh.
So yeah, it is a really great topic to bring up with your family.
That's great.
Some of the other cool things that this does really quickly, the fall also helps with your mental health because you want to be outside a little bit more because the fall colors. Right. So you want to be out, even if it's for 10 minutes, just looking at the leaves, walking. Tons of people go out and take photos of the fall. You start to see everybody taking these photos in the fall that will become Christmas cards.
Yeah.
Right. So you start to see all of this because the colors change. And we have a friend who said the other day that fall leaves are white people's hip hop.
Yes.
And I thought about that. I said, man, that's right. Because everybody wants to be a part of that fall. See all those colors. See all of that stuff. You're laughing because you know what I'm talking about.
Yes. It was actually an African-American comedian who has a whole, we'll link the video. He was hilarious talking about how fall actually is white people's hip hop. And they were all like, yep. It's fun to get to know our cultures like that with our brothers in Christ and be able to laugh with them about stuff like that.
But it's fun because people just really enjoy the fall and the colors. And so get outside, go experience it. It's going to do wonders for your mental health because we already know going outside helps your mental resiliency. So, all right, we've talked about fall. We could do a whole hour segment, I think, on the food section in fall. But let's move on. Let's talk about the tools for our toolbox. Let's talk about how this passive aggressive or assertive communication, what does it do? What does it do? How does it work? And what do we do? All right, so let's talk about the tools for our toolbox. We're going to be talking about effective communication, passive, aggressive, and assertive. So how does it work? And what do we do?
Okay, good. So there's so many theories behind communication and there's so many problems and dysfunctional ways of communicating. And so because I only have 10 minutes, I'm going to talk about one of the most well-known and consolidated summaries of communication styles. And that's what we call passive, aggressive, and then assertive. And so with I'm just going to give you kind of a summary or Cliff Notes version of so a passive communicator is a person who prioritizes the needs, wants, and feelings of others, even at their own expense. And so this person doesn't express their own needs and they don't stand up for them. This person is somebody who internalizes their feelings because they don't want to rock the boat. Okay. There's also the other extreme of the aggressive communicator, and this is the person who prioritizes their own needs, wants, and feelings. They're easily frustrated. They speak louder and they're more overbearing. They're less willing to compromise. They use criticism, humiliation, and domination. They also frequently interrupt, and then they have a hard time genuinely listening.
So would you say that the first person, the passive person, is the doormat? And the aggressive person is that what it was? Aggressive? Mm-hmm. The aggressive person is the one who walks on the doormat?
Sure. Yeah. That's a good visual. Yeah. And Sure. Sure.
That's not exactly where I was going with that, but
mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good analogy. The reality is we all, regardless of how well-intended our parents were, we all have things in our childhood where we either didn't get a need met, weren't nurtured properly. There's something like, it doesn't matter how amazing your parents were or how hard they tried. There's something that, because we're human, that happened to us where we began to putting up survival walls. Okay. And then also, as we're growing up, our parents' dysfunctional communication habits fall on to us, and we learn those dysfunctional communication habits. Mm-hmm. And so 99.9% of people grow up either learning to be a passive communicator or an aggressive communicator. Not many kids are raised intentionally to teach them, this is how you communicate assertively. And so an assertive communication style is a intentionally learned communication style, taught communication style versus the natural consequences of life communication style, if that makes sense.
This goes back to the idea that we talk about a lot of intention.
Yeah. Very, very true. So an assertive communication is going to look like this. It's going to emphasize the importance of both parties' needs. Okay. This person is going to have the ability to stand up for their own needs, wants, and feelings, while also listening and respecting the needs, wants, and feelings of the other person. They have a confidence and a willingness to compromise. So if I give you a scenario, okay, we have a friend asks you to borrow a car. This is going to be a big inconvenience to you if they were to borrow your car. So an aggressive person is going to say, well, let's start with the passive. A passive person is going to say, yeah, I guess that's fine. Do you need me to fill the tank? Okay. An aggressive person is going to say, no way would I let you borrow my car. You're crazy to even ask. Okay. Assertive person is going to say, I need my car that day, but I'll have time to drop you off. Okay. I care about your needs of needing to borrow the car. What exactly do you need with the car? And let me see if I can help you with that need without avoiding my needs. Does that make sense?
Right. Yes.
Right. What is your experience with aggressive and passive communication?
When I was younger, I definitely was the passive communicator. And so I got picked on a lot because of that. And then I learned to fight. And everything changed, and I became the other end of the spectrum. Mm-hmm. Very, very aggressive. And that was my communication style all throughout the Marine Corps, all throughout most of my life. It wasn't until I started actually reading the Bible and doing what it says where it taught me that that's not the way to act. I thought that was the measure of a manhood, the guy who could get his way the most often. Mm-hmm, right? Like be that alpha, be that person who gets their way the most. Yeah. That's the guy who is in charge. That's the guy who's the most successful. And I learned very, very quickly that is not true.
Did you learn the first time?
I did. I did learn the first time. Good throwback.
Okay.
But I did learn that. And because running my janitorial company, I could have very much been the authoritarian and just said, you work for me, you do what I say, and that's it. And there's a lot of companies out there that do that, and they have high turnover rates. I did something different. I really focused on that assertiveness of helping them accomplish their goals where our goals are met as well. So where this is the most prevalent in my company and in my life is I ask people why they want to work for me. Why do you want to work here at this company? And they'll tell me their why. They already know what my expectation of them is. Now, if I have to have some counseling with them or some discipline with them, I always go back to the first two questions. Number one, I ask them, do you still want to work here? 90% of the time they say yes. And I say, okay, well, you told me you wanted to work here because, and I reflect their why back to them. So here's the example. I had a lady who worked for me. She did great. She said she wanted to work for me because she needed to raise up some money so she could send her daughter to college. So that's what she was going to do. So she worked for me and did great. A few years later, she started coming in late. She started having problems with the supervisor. And so I brought her in and I sat her down and I asked her the question, do you still want to work here? Yes. Well, you told me that you wanted to work here so you could raise up some money so you could send your daughter to college. Is that still true? She said, yes. I said, okay, well, coming in late and arguing with the supervisor, is that helping you accomplish your goal of being able to have a job and put your daughter through college? And she said, no. Okay, so how can I best help? And she explained to me that her daughter was already in college now and that her schedule, they have one car, they share it, and the schedule changed. And so that's why she's 10 or 15 minutes late because she has to wait for her daughter to get back with the car so then she can come to work. Very simple solution. We just moved her start time by 30 minutes. The whole problem was solved. But I would have never found that out if I would have just read her the riot act about being late. She would have been late again. We would have terminated her. I would have lost an amazing employee. But because I took the time to find out her why she wanted to work there, I could reflect that value system back to her. And we both, I got to accomplish my goal of keeping the company running. She got to accomplish her goal of putting her daughter through college. And so it worked out very well. So that's my example.
That's a great example. Thank you for sharing that.
There you go.
Well, I mean, I was also a very passive communicator in my early adulthood, and a lot of people question that about me. But we have to start somewhere.
Right.
And that's why I have grown so much as an assertive communicator, because I saw how dysfunctional being a passive communicator was. And unfortunately, the world makes aggressive communicators look so much worse than passive communicators, right? Because they're the bully, they're the loud one, they're demonstrative. When in reality, if we're talking about wanting to have a united relationship, if we're talking husband and wife here, okay, both of them are incredibly dysfunctional because the passive communicator still has needs, wants, and feelings. They're not being communicated clearly. They're not being heard. They're not speaking for whatever fear they have, whether it's justified or not. And that festers. That manifests the wound, okay? And that doesn't just go away. No matter how bad us passive communicators want to think, oh, just forget about it. It doesn't just go away. And so it harms the relationship unit just as much as an aggressive communicator harms the relationship unit. And so I don't want you to think, well, at least I'm not an aggressive communicator. No, you are just as damaging to your relationship if you are a passive communicator. And unfortunately, from the surface, it looks like the lesser of the two evil when they're both very destructive.
That's a really good point. I appreciate you pointing that out because, the aggressive communicator, that's who everybody looks at. Yeah. But you're right, the passive communicator, because they're not contributing to the solution of whatever the problem is, that's just as bad. Yeah. So that's a really good point.
Yeah. Thank you.
So let's get into these I statements.
Okay.
So you told us a little bit about the I statement. I'm still a little confused.
Okay.
Maybe you can break it down a second time for our viewers.
Sure. Well, and I didn't really go into much detail. So an I statement is a very universal, common communication practice for most counselors teach it. When they have couples or family therapy, they teach I statements because it was never taught to us growing up. And of course, those negative coping or negative communication skills start to fester young, and then they just grow and grow and grow until we're older. When we get into relationships where, each relationship has different stages, the honeymoon stage, the challenging stage, all these different phases, right? Where the onion layers start to come off, to where eventually we start seeing things from a very selfish standpoint and protective survival standpoint.
Yes.
Okay. So imagine we're at that place in a relationship with a mother-in-law, a parent, a spouse, a brother, a sister, kids even. These I statements can really help with that. So what it does is it shifts blame when we're feeling flustered, frustrated, hurt, angry. It shifts it from saying, I'm angry because you, and blaming it on them. And it kind of puts it back on yourself because you can only control yourself. So what it really is I feel, and you state an emotion when, and then you explain that. So one example could be, the blaming would be something like this. You can't keep coming home so late. It's so inconsiderate, right? My husband doesn't, but if my husband were to always come home late, that I would rightfully be angry. You are justified to be angry. Sure. And let me know how it goes if that's how you come at your husband. Right?
Right.
It's not helpful. You're so inconsiderate. You always come home late. Let me know, ladies, how that works for you. Okay. Cause it didn't work for me, even though he doesn't come home late, but it would be changing from that natural instinct of just speaking what we're feeling and what's on our mind from that blaming aspect to, I feel worried when you come home late. I can't even sleep. What would be the difference in how maybe your husband would respond to that?
Yeah, it would change the game significantly.
Yeah.
And so this is something that my wife and I actually do. I didn't understand it being called the I statement, but this is something that we do. We focus on doing. And so we'll correct each other when we get it wrong. Great examples. You're being rude. Now the blame is all on you. And so how does that feel when the blame is put on you?
Yeah. I feel attacked.
You feel attacked.
I want to get defensive. I want to defend. I want to deflect.
Yes. And now if I say, I feel really disrespected when you say my name that way. And so,
oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I did not mean to disrespect you.
Right. And so it just changes the dynamic of that conversation.
Yeah.
And so the whole I statement, I didn't understand that terminology, but I definitely know what you're talking about now.
Yeah.
Because my wife and I, we practice that. Because we don't want to put that blame on the other person because that just is like pouring gas on the fire.
Yeah. We might want to, but it's not helpful.
Right.
It's not helpful. And that's what effective communication is effectively communicating my wants, needs, and feelings so the other person hears, understands, and receives it.
The other thing that it does, which is really, really cool, is when you say, I feel like this. Remember, facts and feelings. I'm not saying this as an absolute. I'm not saying you are disrespectful. I'm saying I feel disrespected when this happens. Those are my feelings that I'm taking ownership of, and I'm sharing that with you. This is how I feel. I'm not putting the ownership on you, and I'm not saying that you are disrespectful, giving you that label.
Yeah.
And so it just changes the dynamic of that conversation because I'm just taking ownership of my feelings. And remember, feelings aren't facts, because I doubt very much that my wife was trying to be disrespectful to me, that she was trying to make me feel that way. But if I assign blame to her, saying you're being disrespectful right now, that assigns blame to her. It shows an intention that probably wasn't there.
Yeah.
And so that's where the defensive comes, because I'm labeling her intention toward me.
Yeah.
When really that's not the case. And so it may seem like, I don't know if that makes sense. Just try it. Try it the next time. And you don't have to try it in the heat of the moment, because that might be too much, too fast.
Yeah.
But afterwards,
you
could have this conversation and just watch the dynamic of your spouse. Watch what happens.
Well, and also think through what you're going to say before you say it. And so these I statements are incredible tools also with teenage children or children, right?
Oh, yeah.
Learning to say
I see this.
Right? Because I've given this example. I don't know what another example would be. I'll give it again. I work really hard on Thursdays. because it's my longest day of work. I get up extra early to clean the kitchen, to meal prep, not every week, okay? If my kids see this, I'm like, not every week, right? My intention is to get up early, do my devotion, make breakfast, make the kids' lunches, and meal prep for that night so that when I get home, I come home to a clean house. Because I get a little flustered when everything's all over. It's my longest day. I want to come home to a clean house, and I want to come home to just a casserole in the oven for my kids put in because they're old enough to do that, right? And so when I come home and their shoes are everywhere and their backpacks laid out everywhere and there's dishes piled up in the sink that I got up so early in the morning to make sure wasn't there to come home to, I get really frustrated, I get hurt, and I get angry. And so my instinct is to come in and after a long day of listening to people's problems all day, right? I don't put into practice sometimes what I tell everybody else to do. And I have come home and said, you guys, I work so hard in the morning and I just spew out the mouth. And like, what are you guys, are you doing this? Like, why aren't you thinking of me? And all these blames and all these assumptions of their intentions, right? And my sweet little girls are like, oh, I'm so sorry. But then they're like, oh, we have to do it. Imagine this. I come home, I see it, I take a minute, and I say, girls, sit down with me, please. I feel unseen and unappreciated when I come home on Thursdays to a house that looks like this because I got up extra early this morning to make sure I didn't come home to a house like this. What kind of response do you think I would get with that communication style versus coming in arms raging?
Well, you're going to diffuse the situation completely because there's not going to be anger and animosity added to the mix.
Yeah.
And so number one, I think you'll be able to be heard because you'll be able to communicate effectively and get those thoughts, feelings, and emotions out in a positive way. And then your girls can receive that. And since it's not coming from an aggressive place, they're not going to be defensive. They can receive it, process it, and then they get to choose how do they make that better.
Right. And I'm showing when I choose to do it the right way, because sometimes I don't. But in those moments, I'm showing them how to be an assertive communicator. I'm not just coming in and being like, okay, I'll do it all because I don't want to hurt their feelings, or I'm choosing to share my needs, my wants, my feelings in an assertive and effective way so that I can encourage and empower them to be able to do it the same way as they grow and learn how to communicate effectively.
Yeah, I think this is probably one of the most valuable skills that we've brought to you guys so far, is this right here. I'm so glad that we're talking about it. This is going to be great for your relationships. It really, really is. So if you can learn, it's going to feel uncomfortable when you do it. Like, I don't know if I want to do that. It's going to feel uncomfortable. But think about any new skill that you've learned. It's felt awkward and it's felt uncomfortable and you felt very unsure when you first started. Think about the first time you tried to do a bench press, or the first time you did a push-up, or the first time you tried to run a relay and you had to hand off that baton. It felt really awkward and very weird, but the more you practice it, the better you got. And so just think about that. What skill have you developed that in the beginning you were like, oh, this feels really, really weird? Same thing with this. But if you can master this skill, you're going to be able to master just about any other form of communication that there is out there. Yeah. Whether it's relationships with your family, friends, kids, coworkers, boss, any of those things. Yeah. So pay attention to this. And I think maybe next week, the next time we do this, it would be cool to revisit this and then just do some more examples. Yeah. Maybe some role plays for us. Perfect. On what this looks like so you guys can see what it looks like.
Part 2 of I statements.
Yeah, part 2 of I statements. I think this is fantastic.
Yeah, because we're running out of time today, but this is good information. Yeah. I think we should keep it going.
Yeah. You want to close us out?
Sure. I would love to. So today we talked about telehealth and how it is kind of a newer advancement, the pros and cons to it, what it was then and what it looks like now after COVID. We also talked about the current event, and that is fall or autumn, and all the wonderful things that it can do for your mental health. One of the tools in our toolbox that we talked about today was communication styles, passive communication, aggressive communication, and how to become an assertive communicator. And we also touched on I statements and how to communicate more effectively with the people that are closest to us in our lives so that they can hear what we're saying and we can assertively communicate our thoughts, our feelings, our wants, our needs. So with all of that today, thanks you guys for being with us and going along this journey. We are here to educate you, empower you, and encourage you to share this with other people because we don't want it to just stay right here, right?
That's right.
Oh, and for the mental health janitors, I'm Doc Jess.
And I'm Sgt Q, and we're out.